So our next talk is given by Lewis Hotchkiss, who is the Neuroimaging and AI Research Officer at DP UK, or Dementia Platform UK. And he'll be talking about how to develop safe and responsible AI in neuroscience research. So over to you, Lewis.
Thanks, Rick. I'm Lewis and I'm the Research Officer at Dementia Platform UK. And in this talk, I'll be talking about how DP UK is helping researchers develop responsible AI in neuroscience. So I think we all are aware of the potential benefits of AI in research, especially in neuroscience, to improve diagnosis and early detection of diseases, for prognosis and modeling individual disease trajectories, and even finding treatment options for individuals. But before you can train AI models, you first need access to data. So I thought I'd give a brief overview of what the Dementia Platform UK data portal is. So we are a trusted research environment, and that means we're built upon the 5 safes. So this means that we only allow approved and certified researchers access to anonymized data within secure and safe settings. They also have to have a project application, which is within the public benefit, and any outputs from that research is checked for disclosive information. And so this process looks a bit like this within DPUK, where a data provider will upload their data into our TRE, and we then anonymize that data so it can be shared to researchers. They can then submit an application. Once it's accepted, they can access that data via a secure virtual desktop where they can run their analysis, and we have lots of different resources and HPC clusters for people to utilize. When they want to file out their results, like graphs and figures and tables, then that goes through our file out review process to ensure that there's nothing disclosive or identifiable within that file. And so it's the safety and security of our platform which has really enabled us to grow over the past few years. So we now have over 1,000 users across the world utilizing our data, and we've certainly seen a rise in applications for AI development research, more so on our multimodal data like neuroimaging and genomics. And so our neuroimaging data collection is one of our biggest multimodal collections, where we have around 20 imaging data sets containing lots of different scan types for researchers to be able to build and develop AI models on. And so we've done a lot of work in DPUK to ensure that this data is ready for AI research. And so this means anonymizing that data, defacing the scans, but also standardizing all of our imaging data sets to a common format. So we use the brain imaging data structure. We also look to implement certain pipelines to ensure that we can generate research-ready data for researchers to be able to access and use to develop their AI models on, but also for lots of other different research as well. But there are lots of concerns in AI models. So we recently held a public workshop where we wanted to understand what people's concerns were with the use of their health data for developing AI models. And so, of course, we see some key themes like bias, over-reliance on these tools, and, of course, things like identification and a lack of regulation in this space and how it's not really keeping up with the speed of development of things. They also said that there's a lack of public involvement in this as well. And so this brings me on to kind of responsible AI. How can we develop responsible AI to ensure that we meet all of those concerns that the public have, so that we can ensure that they are private, that they are not biased, that they're robust and can work well in real-world settings, but also sustainable? So if we look at privacy first, we recently did some work where we identified different risks and concerns regarding privacy in AI models. Now, these attacks can be used to either infer certain information, such as whether someone was part of a training data set, or to infer unknown attributes about an individual you might already know. But there's also attacks where you can reconstruct the original training data that was used in that model. Now, there's also other types of AI models which are more vulnerable to sort of data leakage. So if you have an instance-based model, which actually uses instances of the training data as the architecture of the model rather than learning the patterns and properties of the data, then you can actually extract the training data that was used to train that model. So if you're developing an AI model on sensitive healthcare data and you're publishing it out into the public domain, whether that's on something like GitHub, then you're actually publishing the data as part of that, which obviously some data providers don't want. We need to keep their patient privacy as secure as possible. So we really need to take in consideration these attacks and concerns in AI models. So as I say, something like an inversion attack can be used to reconstruct the original data used to train that model. And this has been demonstrated quite a few times in imaging data. If you just even look at a facial recognition AI model, you can query the model by just inputting random statistical noise at the beginning and then exploiting the confidence score to tune this to eventually gain the data that was used to train that model. In something like an attribute inference attack, you might know some individuals about a person already, and you can again exploit the confidence score of the model and use random combinations of the variables that you don't know to try and identify individual information. And now this is more of a concern for people who are in the public domain, so people like celebrities or MPs, but also people who are from minority groups as well. And so we were funded by DARE UK to set up a AI risk evaluation group to look at these concerns and how we can implement strategies to ensure that researchers are making sure their models are safe and private for release from trusted research environments. And so this was really to understand how researchers feel implementing certain privacy-observing techniques in their research, what some of the unique challenges might be with more complex data like neuroimaging and genomics, and how we can help researchers implement techniques, but also help data providers to quantify the risk and assess models to be sure that they can be safely released from our environment. So all of our data is anonymized. So what is the actual risk of re-identification in an anonymized data set? There's been some interesting research looking into this, and one paper was able to identify with quite high accuracy individuals in an anonymized data set, just given 15 attributes. And so we can see here for a given individual, a fairly average individual in the UK, how the removal of certain attributes can affect the risk likelihood of identification. So if we remove the day and date of birth and postcode district, this drastically reduces so that it's not that much of a concern. But if we use the statistical model and change just one of these attributes, the marital status, from never married to same-sex partnership, we can see this risk of identification jump from 2% to 82%. So we can really see the effect that this has on more ethnic minority groups, people with their conditions and different backgrounds, and how they're more prone to these sort of re-identifications in anonymized data sets. So we have to be really careful about protecting their privacy in AI models. And we can see even with the removal of certain attributes, this risk remains relatively high compared to sort of an average individual. But thankfully, there's different mitigation strategies that we can implement to make sure that the models that we are developing are private and secure. So something like homomorphic encryption, where you can actually train AI models on encrypted data. But the problem with this method is it's not really a mature space yet, not really widely adopted. So it's a lot more difficult to actually implement this into research. Now, some other techniques which are more commonly used are synthetic data and differential privacy, where you can essentially add noise into the data to make it harder to identify specific individuals within that. And so this is a lot easier for researchers to be able to implement into their research. But we found from our researcher workshop that a lot of researchers don't really feel confident in implementing these, but more crucially, assessing them and assessing the privacy and how to evaluate the sort of privacy and utility trade-off so that they can build AI models which are still useful, but are also private. And then, of course, there's different methods for sharing and releasing that model. So if you want to train it on external data, then you can use something like federated learning. If you want to deploy that into the real world, you can use something like a secure API, where you can host the AI model within the secure server and just allow people to query it who are authorized. So we asked researchers how they felt about implementing these techniques, and we measured 3 different aspects: the sort of ease of implementation, the effect on utility, and the level of protection that it gives regarding privacy. So we can see that something like homomorphic encryption ranks very highly regarding the protection of privacy because the data is encrypted. If you attack it, then you can't gain any useful information from that. Whereas something like federated learning is ranked at the bottom because you're still sharing that AI model between different servers, so it's still prone to those attacks. If we look at something like the ease of implementation, though, things like SMPC and homomorphic encryption are a lot harder to implement, whereas synthetic data and differential privacy are some of the easiest methods to implement. So we really need to consider all these different aspects on how we can expect researchers to implement these techniques into their research. Our team at the DPUK data portal also had to go at running some attacks on different models and on their safe versions. So we can see for a support vector machine with quite good accuracy, there's quite a high attack accuracy as part of this. If we implement a differentially private version, then we can see that the attack accuracy reduces, but so does the utility. So it can often be difficult to find the right balance between data which is useful and private. When you look at something like a neural network model, these are often a lot more harder to attack. So there's less of concerns there. So these attacks and concerns are really dependent on the kind of models that are being developed, but also the kind of data that you're using as well. So when we asked if researchers had the expertise to implement these, people said that they had a lack of experience, they need to have training in this, and it's not really common practice, so they don't really know the techniques which are out there to do this. So we really need to help researchers to be able to implement these techniques and find ways to ensure that their models are private. And so from our workshop results, we put together a recommendation framework for the safe development of AI and release from trusted research environments, both at the pre-project stage and at the post-project stage. So one of the crucial things that was identified was training. We need to have training for researchers to be able to identify risks in AI models and how to appropriately mitigate them. So DPUK has been working in collaboration with DataScience to be able to deliver courses to enable researchers to learn about these things. We also developed tools to allow researchers to evaluate that privacy and utility trade-off. So for something like synthetic data, we created tools to be able to generate synthetic data and evaluate based on the different privacy utility metrics. So whether that's how well it performs in a machine learning task or how well it protects against a privacy attack. And so you can adjust the parameters of this synthetic data generation and evaluate this trade-off. So we can see that something with quite low noise added into the synthetic data, the utility is very high, but the privacy is very low. So it doesn't really offer that much of a protection. If we add loads of noise into the synthetic data generation, then we get a very high privacy score, but a very low utility score. So it's basically not usable. It's not useful in any sense. So we need to be able to try find a sweet spot in between where it's both useful and private. So our tools and visualization metrics allow researchers to be able to do this. Dare UK also funded another project called SACRO, which looked at methods to attack AI models to quantify the risk of these and releasing them. So from our data provider workshop, we found that attacking a model offered the best way for assessing whether it was suitable to be released publicly. And so we can run these attacks in the trusted research environment before the AI model is released to ensure that it is safe and not vulnerable to attacks in the real world. We also developed an AI risk index, bringing together perspectives of members of the public, AI researchers, and data providers. So it takes into consideration the different types of data and AI models which a researcher might be implementing, how they plan to release it, what techniques they plan to implement, and whether it's vulnerable to any types of attacks. And so we can assign scores to these models then to quantify the risk of releasing them to help in the assessment of that. But a key recommendation from our workshops was the application of the FAIR framework for AI models. So in DPUK, we ensure that all of our data is fair. So that means it's findable, accessible, and reusable. And so, that's through our data discovery tools, making it accessible through our trusted research environment, and making sure there's lots of documentation and metadata to ensure that other people can access and use this data. But we can also apply this to AI models. So we don't necessarily need to publish AI on something like GitHub. Some journals will require that you make AI models accessible in order for you to publish your paper, but we can actually publish the AI model via the trusted research environment, where it stays secure within the TRE, and it's treated as derived from the original data, where researchers can then access that data to be able to reproduce and validate and fine-tune that model. So we can really enable open and reproducible science in AI research while making sure that the models are private, and we're still ensuring that the patient privacy is protected in the data sets that us as a TRV are entrusted with. So that covers the kind of privacy side of responsible AI. So now I want to talk a little bit about bias in AI models. Now, this is kind of a big problem in AI currently, especially with kind of dementia models, where we see a lot of the training data used in AI models is from white ethnicities. And so to be able to build more robust and representative models, we really need access to more representative data sets from other populations to be able to train these more robust models. And bias in AI is a big problem anyway, not even taking into consideration sort of the ethnicity side. There's huge problems with having imbalanced data sets in AI. So if you're training an AI model to classify between healthy and dementia patients, you'll often have a lot more healthy patients compared to dementia patients. And then you'll split this setup into training and testing. And so often the AI model will have a lot more samples of the healthy population to learn from compared to the dementia population. And so this is where you start to get problems where it finds it difficult to learn the patterns of the dementia population because there's so many more from the healthy population. So it struggles with minority classes. And so this is why in AI models, we tend to use techniques to balance the data to ensure that we have equal numbers of the classes for the model to properly be able to learn the properties to be able to differentiate between these. This becomes even more of a problem where we have ethnic minorities and people from different backgrounds where they could be completely forgotten about in the AI model because there just isn't enough data to be able to learn the properties of those groups. So Deep UK, of course, has access to lots of different data sets across the UK. We have over 60 cohort data sets. And these can be really useful for building robust models. We see, especially in neuroimaging data, that a lot of the time people just use ADNI data to develop their AI models. We need to be incorporating lots of other different data sets to ensure that they can be validated and are robust. And we even have data sets like HumanMC, which specifically collects neuroimaging data from real-world memory clinic sites for the purpose of validating AI models in a real-world setting. But of course, it's not just the UK where we have data sets from. We have Memento, which is one of our biggest data sets, which looks at collecting data from memory clinics. And we also have Dementia's Platform Australia, which looks at bringing together data sets from Australia, but also facilitating access to Asian population data sets. We're also working with ADDI to look at federation solutions to ensure that we can access lots of different data sources to be able to bring them together into one place to build these robust AI models. And this is achieved through our federation solutions. And so we're working with international partners as well to be able to incorporate data from different countries and different sites across the world. We've been working with the Korean Brain Research Institute to try to get their data within the portal. And the HumanMC study is looking to expand their collection to more international memory clinic sites so that we have more representative data sets that we can build AI models on, which take into account these different ethnicities. Regarding robustness in AI models, this, the kind of bias kind of feeds into this. But we've been working with the Demon Network on a project looking at generalizability of AI models. So we've been taking published models in the literature and testing how well they generalize on different data sets within Deep UK, but also other data sets as well. So we can see how well they can generalize and how robust they are to different populations. So this is really important to evaluate to ensure that your models can work in different populations and real-world settings. Sustainability is another aspect of responsible AI. I won't go into too much detail, as I know there's some other great talks talking about sustainability in neuroscience, but we're really trying to incorporate sustainability into what we do in Deep UK. So this includes implementing, sustainable pipelines so that we can ensure that, we're using the HPC as minimally as possible. It also means getting rid of all the junk data as part of that and ensuring that we don't have loads of research projects generating the same data over and over again. We can just give them processed data to be able to do their research. We're also implementing things like carbon tracking in our HPC and job scheduling. And training is also a big important part of this, so that researchers know how to write high quality code to use the HPC clusters effectively. So those are the kind of aspects that cover responsible AI neuroscience. And in DPUK, we've really been trying to help researchers as much as possible to enable them to implement these different techniques and ensure that the AI they're developing is responsible and safe and can be released into the real world. We've been working with many different projects to really enable that to happen, because these AI models are not useful unless we actually can translate them into the real world. So we really need to take into consideration all of these different aspects to be able to do that.